The axe falls again. Each swing crashes down with the weight of madness, with the fury of something that was once human, but has now become something else entirely. The cobblestones of the Tomb of Oedon are slick with blood, pooling in the cracks between ancient stones that have witnessed centuries of death. Bodies lie broken and scattered across the cemetery like discarded dolls. The hunters who came before you, the townsfolk who wandered too close, all of them dead by the same hand, the same weapon, the same inexorable descent into bestial rage. And standing over this carnage, breathing heavily, covered in blood that is not his own, is the man who was once called father, once called husband, once called protector. His hunter's garb is torn and soaked through, the dark fabric glistening wet in the pale moonlight. His hat sits askew on his head, somehow still there despite the violence. In his massive hands he grips his hunter axe, the weapon extended to its full, lethal length, ready for one more kill. Just one more. There's always one more. He doesn't look up when you approach. Not at first. He's too busy with his work, too consumed by whatever drives him now. The axe rises and falls on a body that stopped moving long ago, that stopped being recognizable as human several blows back. But he continues. Something in him needs to continue. Something in him can't stop. Then he hears you, or perhaps he smells you. The fresh blood pumping through your veins, the life that still clings to your body, the warmth that marks you as prey. His head turns slowly, mechanically, and for just a moment you see his face beneath the shadow of his hat. His eyes are wild, not quite human anymore, not quite beast either. Something caught between the two states, trapped in the horrifying transformation that takes all hunters eventually. He speaks, and his voice is rough, strained, as if the words hurt coming out. Beasts all over the shop. A pause, heavy breathing. You'll be one of them, sooner or later. And then he charges. Tonight we're going to explore one of the most heartbreaking stories in all of gaming. The complete tragedy of Father Gascoigne, a tale of transformation and loss, of good intentions corrupted, of a family destroyed piece by piece until nothing remains. Get comfortable. Pull your blankets close. Let the gothic horrors of Yharnam wash over you like a fever dream. Because this is a story that will stay with you long after you've drifted off to sleep. This is going to be a long night, but I promise you by the end of it you'll understand why Father Gascoigne's story is considered one of the most perfectly crafted tragedies in all of gaming. You'll understand what it means to hunt beasts until you become one yourself. You'll understand the price paid by those who believe they can fight monsters without becoming monstrous. And you'll understand that sometimes the greatest horror isn't the transformation itself, but the moment of clarity when you realize what you've become. The story of Father Gascoigne is the story of Bloodborne itself, distilled into one man's descent. It's the story of every hunter who ever walked the streets of Yharnam. It's a warning and a prophecy and a lament all woven together. It's about how the line between hunter and beast grows thinner with every kill, how bloodlust creeps into your veins so slowly you don't notice until it's too late, how the very thing you're fighting against becomes the thing you're fighting for. This is the story of a man who came to Yharnam to do good, who found love in a cursed city, who built a family against impossible odds, who protected those who couldn't protect themselves, and who lost everything, including himself, one piece at a time, until nothing remained but bestial fury and the distant echo of a music box playing a lullaby he could no longer remember. So take a deep breath. Let the outside world fade away. because we're about to descend into the gothic nightmare of Yharnam, where the hunt never ends and every hunter eventually becomes the hunted. Father Gascoigne was not native to Yharnam. This is crucial to understanding his story, because it means he chose to come to this cursed city. He wasn't born into its nightmare. He walked into it willingly, with open eyes and noble intentions, believing he could make a difference, believing he could help. The title, Father, that precedes his name is not a familial designation, though he would eventually become a father in the literal sense. No, this was a title of religious office, a rank given to clerics in his homeland. According to the description found on his weathered cap, Father is a title used for clerics in a foreign land, and there is no such rank in the healing church. This tells us something important. Gascoigne came from a place with different traditions, different hierarchy, different ways of understanding the divine. Where exactly did he come from? The game hints at connections to other From Software worlds. In cut dialogue discovered in the game's alpha version, Gascoigne mutters Umbasa upon killing the player, a phrase known only to the clerics of Boletaria from Demon's Souls. Whether this is meant to establish a literal connection between the worlds, or simply a knowing reference to From Software's own mythology, it tells us that Gascoigne's homeland had its own religious traditions, its own understanding of faith and duty. But whatever life he had in that foreign land, whatever position he held, whatever comfort and respect came with his clerical title, Gascoigne left it all behind. He travelled to Yharnam, that isolated city tucked into mountainous terrain, that place of Gothic spires and cobblestone streets, that beacon of medical miracles that drew desperate souls from across the known world. Why would a cleric from a distant land make such a journey? The answer, like so many things in Bloodborne, is blood. Yharnam had discovered something in the catacombs beneath their city, in the ancient Thumerian ruins that honeycombed the earth. With labyrinthine passages, they had found the old blood, a substance of almost miraculous properties that could cure any disease, heal any wound, strengthen any body. The healing church had been established to administer this blood ministration, and word of their success had spread far and wide. Perhaps Gascoigne came seeking healing for someone he loved. Perhaps he came as a pilgrim, hoping to study the medical miracles that Yharnam had achieved. Perhaps he came on missionary work, believing that his faith could help guide the healing church's practices. Or perhaps he simply came as a scholar, drawn by tales of this city where the boundaries between medicine and miracle had been erased. Whatever his initial reason, it was innocent, noble even. He came to help, not to hunt. But Yharnam had a way of changing people's plans. By the time Gascoigne arrived, the city was already beginning to show signs of the scourge that would eventually consume it. The old blood that had promised. Miracles was beginning to reveal its true nature. Those who partook of it were transforming, their humanity slipping away as their bodies twisted into bestial forms. The streets that should have been safe were becoming dangerous. The night that should have been peaceful was filling with howls and screams. The healing church needed hunters, not healers, not clerics, hunters. Warriors who could walk into the night and kill the beast that had once been human. Warriors who could do what needed to be done without hesitation, without mercy, without the burden of seeing the person beneath the fur and fangs. And Gascoigne, this foreign cleric with his title and his faith, found himself recruited into a role he never intended to fill. We don't know exactly how this transition happened, Perhaps he witnessed someone transform and understood immediately that action needed to be taken. Perhaps he was attacked by a beast and learned quickly how to defend himself. Perhaps he saw the suffering of innocent citizens and felt called to protect them, drawing on whatever combat training clerics received in his homeland. Or perhaps, like so many who came to Yharnam seeking miracles, he himself received blood ministration, and the change it wrought in him was both physical and psychological. What we do know is that Gascoigne became a hunter. He traded his clerical robes for the weathered garb of those who walked the night. He took up the hunter axe, that brutal weapon designed for a single purpose: killing beasts. He learned the ways of the hunt, the patterns of the beasts, the rhythm of violence that became as natural as breathing. And he discovered he had a talent for it, a terrible, undeniable talent for dealing death. His garb, which would later become available to purchase after his death, tells us more about this transformation. The description reads, "Hunter attire worn by Father Gascoigne, similar to hunter garb created at the workshop, only these are tainted by a pungent, beastly stench that eats away at Gascoigne. That stench is crucial. It suggests that even early in his career as a hunter, something was wrong. Either he had killed so many beasts that their essence had seeped into his very clothing, or the beast scourge was already festering within him, waiting for its moment to emerge." Gascoigne joined the ranks of the Healing Church hunters, those black-clad warriors who served the church's interests and protected its territories. He learned to wield his axe with devastating efficiency, mastering both its compact form for close quarters and its extended form for sweeping strikes. He paired it with a blunderbuss, that wide-bore firearm that could stagger even the most aggressive beasts mid-attack. His fighting style was aggressive, relentless, overwhelming. He didn't dance around his prey like some hunters. He charged in, axe swinging, and didn't stop until the beast was dead. But eventually, Gascoigne parted ways with the Healing Church. The descriptions of his attire note this separation, though the exact reasons remain unclear. Perhaps he grew disillusioned with the church's practices, seeing how they covered up the true extent of the scourge. Perhaps he wanted independence, to hunt according to his own conscience rather than church orders. Perhaps he left because he was starting to change, and he didn't want the church's hunters to notice what was happening to him. Or perhaps, most simply, he met someone who gave him a reason to care about something other than the hunt. In that cursed city of blood and beasts surrounded by death and transformation, the foreign cleric who had become a hunter found something he wasn't looking for. He found love. He found a woman named Viola. And for a brief, precious time he found hope that Yharnam could be more than just a hunting ground, that it could be a home. To understand Gascoigne's tragedy, we must understand the world he entered, the city that would eventually consume him. Yharnam was built on blood, and blood would be its undoing. Long before Gascoigne arrived, early settlers had discovered something beneath the city. Massive labyrinths stretched deep into the earth, the remnants of an ancient civilization called Thumaru. These weren't natural caves or simple catacombs. They were architecturally sophisticated structures, vast networks of ritual chambers and throne rooms, guarded by ancient warriors who had long since become something more than human and less than divine. The Thumerians had achieved something that defied understanding. They had made contact with beings beyond human comprehension, entities that existed in dimensions adjacent to our own, gods that thought in geometries that human minds couldn't process without breaking. And the Thumerians had paid a terrible price for this contact. Their civilization had collapsed into these subterranean ruins, its people transformed into hollow guardians of secrets that perhaps should have remained buried. But they had left behind something valuable, something the people of Yharnam would find irresistible. They had left behind blood, old blood, blood that carried within it echoes of the Great Ones, those cosmic entities that the Thumerians had communed with. Blood that could reshape reality itself on a microscopic level, rewriting the rules of biology, defeating disease, pushing back death. The Healing Church was founded on the strength of this discovery. What began as scholarly research into the properties of the old blood quickly became a religious institution, because what they had found wasn't just medicine, it was miracle. A single blood ministration, a simple transfusion of this ancient blood, could cure diseases that had plagued humanity since the dawn of time. Tuberculosis, cancer, plague, all of it erased by the old blood. The blind could see. The lame could walk. The dying could live. Yharnam became a beacon of hope for the sick and suffering across the world. But blood has memory, blood carries intention, and the old blood remembered what the Thumerians had become in their communion with the Great Ones. It remembered transformation, it remembered ascension, it remembered the blurring of lines between human and beast, between mortal and divine, between sanity and the howling void of cosmic truth. The scourge began slowly. A patient here or there would develop strange symptoms after blood ministration. Unusual hair growth, heightened aggression, changes in dentition. The Healing Church dismissed these as rare side effects, statistical anomalies in an otherwise miraculous treatment. They adjusted their techniques, refined their blood preparation processes, assured the public that everything was under control. But the scourge spread anyway, following patterns that defied medical understanding, as if it had an intelligence of its own, as if it were intentionally selecting certain individuals for transformation. Those afflicted with the scourge began to change. The process varied in speed. Some transformed over weeks, their humanity eroding gradually as their bodies reshaped themselves. Others changed in hours, especially during the full moon when some cosmic influence seemed to amplify the blood's transformative properties. The transformations themselves were nightmarish. Flesh would ripple and reform. Bones would crack and extend. Faces would elongate into snouts. Hands would become claws. Humanity would slip away like water through fingers, replaced by something primal, something bestial, something that thought only of hunger and violence. The beasts were strong, inhumanly strong. A single transformed individual could kill multiple ordinary humans with ease. They seemed to feel no pain, no fear, no hesitation. They were pure aggression given form, and once the transformation was complete, there was no reversing it. No cure existed. No treatment could restore what had been lost. The person was gone. Only the beast remained. Yharnam's solution was brutal but necessary. The hunt. On nights when the moon was full, when the scourge seemed most active, the hunt would be called. Church officials would ring bells throughout the city, a signal that all citizens should bar their doors and windows, light incense to ward off the beastly presence, and wait out the night while hunters did their grim work. These hunters were volunteers at first, brave souls willing to face the beast to protect their neighbours. But as the scourge worsened, the Healing Church formalised the process. They established the workshop, a facility dedicated to crafting weapons specifically designed for killing beasts. They recruited hunters, trained them, equipped them, and sent them into the night with a simple mandate: kill every beast you find. The weapons crafted at the workshop were ingenious and terrible. Trick weapons, they were called. Devices that could transform between two forms to adapt to different combat situations. The saw cleaver could shift from a large machete to a jagged saw for ripping through thick hide. The threaded cane concealed a bladed whip for long-range strikes. The hunter axe, Gascoigne's chosen weapon, could extend to double its length for devastating overhead swings. These weren't dueling weapons. They weren't designed for honourable combat. They were designed for butchery, for efficient killing, for reducing beasts to corpses as quickly as possible. The hunters learned techniques to enhance their effectiveness. They used blood vials, carefully prepared transfusions of blood that could heal wounds in seconds, allowing them to continue fighting despite injuries that would incapacitate normal humans. They used quicksilver bullets in their firearms, special ammunition that could interrupt a beast's attack, and create openings for devastating visceral attacks. They learned to parry with perfectly timed gunshots, to dodge through attacks at the last possible moment, to show no mercy and expect none in return. But here was the terrible irony at the heart of the hunt. The hunters themselves were not immune to the scourge. In fact, they were especially vulnerable to it. They waded through blood every night. Their clothes were soaked in it. Their weapons dripped with it. They breathed it as mist in the air. More than that, they used blood vials constantly, injecting themselves with blood to heal their wounds, taking the very substance that caused the transformation and putting it directly into their veins. The healing church assured them these blood vials were safe, carefully processed to remove the corrupting influence. But everyone knew, deep down, that this was a comfortable lie. The blood remembered. The blood always remembered. And there was something else, something more insidious than the physical exposure to corrupted blood. There was the psychological element, the bloodlust, the addiction to violence that crept into every hunter's psyche, the thrill of the hunt, the rush of adrenaline that came with each kill, the satisfaction of standing over a fallen beast, axe in hand, blood cooling on the cobblestones. It felt good. That was the terrible truth no one wanted to acknowledge. Hunting felt good. And the more you hunted, the more you wanted to hunt. The more you killed, the more you needed to kill. This was what awaited anyone who took up the hunter's life. It was only a matter of time before the transformation began. Maybe it would take years, maybe decades for the lucky ones. But eventually, inevitably, every hunter would feel it starting, the bloodlust becoming harder to control, the boundaries between human and beast beginning to blur, the person they had been slowly eroding, replaced by something that lived only for the hunt, that craved the violence, that needed the blood. The healing church knew this. They had systems in place to deal with hunters who had become too dangerous, who showed signs of losing themselves. Sometimes a hunter would simply disappear, their fate never officially acknowledged. Other times, hunters would be assigned to hunt hunters, tracking down those who'd gone blood drunk and ending them before they could fully transform. It was considered a mercy. A quick death, while still recognizably human, was better than full transformation into a mindless beast. This was the world Gascoigne entered. This was the bargain he made when he took up the hunter axe. Protection of the innocent in exchange for his own humanity, measured out in nightly hunts, each one bringing him closer to the transformation he was fighting against. but perhaps he believed he could beat it. Perhaps he thought his faith would protect him, his clerical background giving him spiritual defenses that other hunters lacked. Perhaps he thought he could quit before it was too late, that he would recognize the warning signs and stop before crossing the point of no return. Or perhaps, like so many hunters, he simply didn't let himself think about it too much. The hunt demanded total focus. The beast required all his attention. And when dawn came and he could finally rest, exhaustion dulled any philosophical concerns about his long-term fate. Tomorrow's transformation was a distant worry. Tonight's beasts were an immediate threat. And so the hunt continued, night after night, each one leaving its mark, each one taking another small piece of his humanity and replacing it with something darker. Gascoigne quickly established himself as a skilled hunter. His aggressive fighting style and brutal efficiency made him effective at clearing beast-infested areas. He could go where other hunters hesitated, could face down creatures that would send weaker men running. His foreign origins, which might have made him an outsider in Yharnam's insular society, became an asset in the hunt. He had no personal connections to the beasts he killed, no childhood memories of the humans they used to be, no hesitation born from recognition. To him, they were simply beasts that needed to be destroyed. But even the most capable hunter needed support. The hunt was too dangerous, too unpredictable, too overwhelming for any individual to face alone night after night. Hunters worked in pairs or small groups, watching each other's backs, covering blind spots, sharing resources and information. And Gascoigne found his partner in an older hunter named Henryk. Henryk was an old hunter, one of those who had been hunting since the early days of the Scourge. His yellow garb was distinctive, resistant to bolt damage, a practical choice for someone who had hunted long enough to learn the strengths and weaknesses of various beast types. The description of his attire reveals something crucial. The taciturn old hunter Henryk was once partners with Father Gascoigne, and though they were a fierce and gallant duo, their partnership led to Henryk's tragically long life. That phrase, tragically long life, is haunting. In Yharnam, where death lurked around every corner, where hunters fell regularly to beast claws and fangs, living a long time was normally considered fortunate. But for Henryk, his longevity was tragic. Perhaps he had wanted to die in battle, to fall in the hunt rather than succumb to the slow transformation that awaited all hunters. Perhaps he had watched too many partners fall, had survived too many encounters that should have killed him, and the weight of that survival had become unbearable. Or perhaps, as some speculate, his tragic longevity was tied specifically to his partnership with Gascoigne, to events that would unfold later, to losses that would make a long life feel like a curse. But in those early days, Gascoigne and Henryk were simply an effective hunting duo. Henryk fought with a hunter's pistol and a saw cleaver, favouring precision over Gascoigne's overwhelming force. Where Gascoigne charged in with his axe extended, Henryk would hang back slightly, using his pistol to interrupt beast attacks and create openings. Where Gascoigne focused on single targets with devastating overhead strikes, Henryk would manage multiple threats with the saw cleaver's serrated edge. They complemented each other perfectly, and their success rate was impressive. Together they hunted through central Yharnam's darkest corners. They cleared the aqueducts where giant pigs roamed. They ventured into the tombs where the beast gathered in packs. They fought on the great bridge where the cleric beast appeared, that massive creature whose transformation had been so complete that almost nothing human remained. They learned the patterns of different beast types, the hunched, aggressive scourge beasts that attacked in frenzied rushes, the larger brutes whose strength could cave in a hunter's skull, the dogs whose speed made them deadly despite their small size. The hunt settled into a rhythm. As dusk approached and the moon began to rise, Gascoigne would prepare his equipment. He would oil his axe, check the mechanism that extended it, ensure the blade was sharp enough to cleave through flesh and bone. He would load his blunderbuss with quicksilver bullets, testing the action to ensure it wouldn't jam at a critical moment. He would fill vials with blood for quick healing during combat, and then, as the first howls echoed across the city, he would meet Henryk, and they would begin their patrol. Each hunt was different, but also somehow the same. The narrow streets of central Yharnam, slick with rain or blood or both. The piles of corpses left by previous beasts stacked like cordwood and set ablaze by fearful citizens. The locked doors and barred windows behind which families huddled in darkness, praying the night would end quickly. The occasional brave or foolish citizen calling out warnings from behind their barriers, pointing hunters toward nearby beasts. And always, always the beasts themselves, prowling, hunting, killing, driven by instincts they no longer had the humanity to resist. Gascoigne learned the geography of violence. He knew which alleys were too narrow for his extended axe. He knew which rooftops provided tactical advantages. He knew where beasts liked to ambush hunters, where they gathered in numbers, where the most dangerous specimens tended to appear. He learned to read the sounds of the night, the difference between distant howls and nearby threats, the subtle changes in pitch that indicated a beast had caught a scent, the sudden silence that meant something big was approaching, and he learned to manage the bloodlust. Every hunter had to master this or die. The fury that rose during combat, the desire to keep swinging even after the beast was dead, the craving for more violence, more blood, more killing. Good hunters learned to channel this bloodlust, to use it as fuel during combat, but shut it down when the threat was eliminated. They learned to recognize when they were losing control, when the beast within themselves was getting too strong, and to pull back before crossing the line. Henryk likely helped Gascoigne learn these skills, teaching him the mental disciplines that could keep a hunter human even after years in the blood. But managing bloodlust was like holding your breath. You could do it for a while, but eventually you had to inhale. The pressure built night after night, hunt after hunt. Each kill added to the weight, to the accumulated fury that had nowhere to go. Some hunters found release in alcohol or other vices during the day. Others threw themselves into training, channeling the violent urges into endless practice. Still others simply grew quieter, more withdrawn, the effort of maintaining their humanity consuming all their spare energy. Gascoigne's relationship with Henryk went beyond simple partnership. They became friends, or as close to friends as hunters could be in Yharnam's nightmare. They trusted each other with their lives every night. They knew each other's fighting styles intimately, could predict each other's movements, could coordinate without speaking. After particularly difficult hunts, they would share stories over drinks, comparing notes on beast behaviour, discussing new techniques they'd developed. Henryk, with his years of experience, became something like a mentor to the foreign cleric turned hunter. The partnership benefited both of them. Gascoigne's aggressive style worked well with Henryk's more measured approach. Henryk's experience helped keep Gascoigne alive through encounters that might otherwise have ended him. Together they built a reputation. Other hunters knew them as reliable, capable, willing to take on the most dangerous assignments. The Healing Church trusted them to handle sensitive situations, to clear areas that needed to be accessible, to hunt beasts that had proven particularly difficult to eliminate. But success in the hunt always came with a price. Every night spent hunting was another night exposed to the blood, another accumulation of that pungent beastly stench that was already eating away at Gascoigne. Every beast killed was another small erosion of the barrier between hunter and hunted. Every time he let the bloodlust rise to fuel his fighting, it became slightly harder to push back down. The transformation was gradual, imperceptible from day to day, but inexorable. Like water wearing away stone, the hunt wore away at Gascoigne's humanity, and no amount of skill or willpower could stop it forever. Amidst the blood and violence of Yharnam's endless night, Gascoigne found something he wasn't expecting. He found Viola. She was Yharnamite, born and raised in the cursed city, someone who had grown up knowing that beasts walked the streets and hunters prowled in their wake. She understood the rhythms of Yharnam in a way Gascoigne, as a foreigner, never entirely would. She knew which streets were safer during the day, which shops could be trusted, which neighbours would help in a crisis, and which would bar their doors. She had learned to live with a constant threat, to find moments of normalcy between the hunts, to carve out a life in a city that seemed determined to destroy all life within its borders. We don't know exactly how they met. Perhaps Gascoigne saved her from a beast attack, playing the part of the heroic hunter rescuing the helpless civilian. Perhaps she worked in one of the establishments that catered to hunters, providing equipment or healing supplies, and they met through those professional interactions. Perhaps they simply encountered each other in one of Yharnam's markets or churches, two people whose eyes met across a crowded space and recognized something in each other, some spark of hope or defiance or simple human warmth in a city growing colder by the day. What we do know is that despite the impossibility of it, despite the danger and the darkness and the inevitable tragedy that awaited anyone foolish enough to love in Yharnam, they fell for each other. Viola saw past the blood-soaked hunter to the man beneath, the foreign cleric who had come to Yharnam with good intentions, who still retained traces of his faith and his honour, despite everything the hunt had done to him. And Gascoigne saw in Viola something he had lost when he left his homeland, a connection to ordinary life, a reminder that there were things worth protecting beyond simply killing beasts. Their courtship must have been strange and fragmented. Gascoigne could only meet her during the day, those precious hours between dawn and dusk when the hunt paused and hunters could rest. He would be exhausted from the night's work, covered in bruises and minor wounds that his blood vials hadn't quite fully healed, his muscles aching from hours of constant combat. But he would clean himself up as best he could, wash the blood from his hands and face, and find his way to wherever Viola was. They would walk through Yharnam's streets in daylight, and the city was almost beautiful then. The Gothic architecture that seemed so threatening in moonlight took on a different character in the sun. The cathedral spires reached toward heaven rather than casting ominous shadows. The cobblestones were just cobblestones, not a canvas for blood. For a few hours they could almost pretend they lived at a normal city, where the greatest danger was weather and the biggest concern was making a living. But the night always came again, and when it did, Gascoigne would have to leave. Viola behind would have to take up his axe and venture back into the streets to face whatever fresh horrors the darkness brought. Every time he left, they both knew he might not return. One unlucky encounter, one moment of hesitation, one particularly strong beast could end him. Viola would spend those nights waiting, listening to the sounds of combat echoing through the city, wondering if each howl or scream or gunshot meant her hunter had fallen. Against all logic, against all sense, they decided to build a life together. They were married. Though whether in a formal ceremony or simply a private commitment, we don't know. Yharnam's institutions were breaking down as the scourge worsened. Perhaps the healing church still performed weddings. Perhaps they made their vows in private, needing no official blessing to know they were bound to each other. What mattered was the choice they made, to love each other in a city that seemed designed to destroy love, to start a family in a place where families fell apart every night, to hope for a future in a place where the future looked darker every day. They found a home together in central Yharnam, a modest residence not far from the Tomb of Oedon. It wasn't much, just a few rooms in one of the tall, narrow buildings that lined Yharnam's streets, but it was theirs. Viola made it a home in whatever way she could, creating a space of warmth and safety in a city of cold and danger. She would wait there each night while Gascoigne hunted, keeping a light burning in the window so he could find his way back, so he would know that someone was waiting for him, that he had a reason to return. Gascoigne tried to separate his two lives. During the hunt, he was the aggressive warrior, all violence and fury, the man who could cleave a beast in two without hesitation. But at home, he tried to be just a man. He tried to leave the bloodlust at the door, to scrub the beastly stench from his clothes, to be someone Viola could love without fear. The strain of maintaining this division must have been enormous. How do you turn off the instincts that keep you alive in combat? How do you become gentle after spending hours being brutal? How do you look at your wife with the same eyes that hours before watched beasts die by your hand? But somehow, he managed it. Or Viola saw through it and loved him anyway, accepting both sides of him, the hunter and the husband. She knew what he was, what he did every night. She had no illusions about the man she'd married, but she also knew that somewhere inside the blood-soaked hunter was the foreign cleric who had come to Yharnam hoping to help people. And she loved that man, or the ghost of that man, or simply the man he was trying to be when he was with her. Their love was an act of defiance. Every day they stayed together was a victory over the city that wanted to grind them down. Every moment of tenderness was a declaration that Yharnam hadn't won, that humanity could still flourish, even in the darkest places. They built a life in the spaces between the hunts, in the quiet moments before dawn, in the brief reprieves when the city remembered it was more than just a hunting ground. And then, despite everything, despite the danger and the uncertainty and the knowledge that Yharnam was no place to raise children, they decided to have a family. Perhaps it was hope. Perhaps it was defiance. Perhaps it was simply the most basic human drive to create life in the face of death, to believe in continuation even when everything suggests an ending. Whatever their reasons, Viola became pregnant, and for a time there was joy in that small home near the Tomb of Oedon, a joy that had nothing to do with the hunt or the blood or the beasts that prowled outside. Gascoigne was going to be a father, not just father, the clerical title, but a father in the truest sense, and somehow, impossibly, beautifully, tragically, that seemed like the most important thing in a world where nothing seemed to matter anymore. Viola gave birth to their first daughter, and the small home in central Yharnam became something it had never been before, a place of genuine innocence. The girl grew with her mother's features and wore red ribbons in her hair, those bright splashes of colour standing out against Yharnam's perpetual grey. She was proof that life could still flourish in the cursed city, that love could create something pure even in the most corrupted environment. Then came the second daughter, younger, with a white ribbon that marked her as distinct from her older sister. Now Gascoigne wasn't just protecting abstract citizens or fulfilling some vague duty to the healing church. He was protecting his children, his daughters, the two most precious things in his world. The girls transformed the household entirely. Where before there had been only the tension of waiting for Gascoigne to return from each hunt, now there was the ordinary chaos of family life. Children's laughter filled rooms that had known only worried silence. Small toys appeared in corners. The sounds of playing and learning and growing replaced the ambient dread that permeated most Yharnam homes. For the first time since arriving in the cursed city, Gascoigne experienced something approaching normalcy. Viola poured herself into motherhood with the same determination that had allowed her to survive in Yharnam. She taught the girls songs and stories, carefully edited to remove the darkest elements of Yharnam's reality. She maintained routines that children need: regular meals, consistent bedtimes, gentle discipline. She created a bubble of childhood innocence inside their home, a space where the girls could be children despite the nightmare city surrounding them. The older daughter, as she grew, began to understand more about their world. She learned that their father was a hunter, that he went out at night to fight beasts. She learned that the red incense her mother burned wasn't just for pleasant smell, but to ward off beastly influence. She learned to recognize the sound of the hunt bells, to understand when it was safe to look out windows and when shutters needed to be sealed tight. But understanding didn't mean accepting. She was still young enough to believe her father was invincible, that he would always come home, that their family was safe. The younger daughter was too small to grasp the full reality of their situation. To her, father was simply the man who left when it got dark and returned in the morning. She didn't question this pattern any more than she questioned why the sun rose and set. Her world was mother's arms, sisters' games, the small room where they slept, and the few other rooms that made up their home. The wider horrors of Yharnam existed outside her understanding, kept at bay by her youth and her mother's careful protection. Music became central to their family life. Viola had a small music box, a precious possession in a city where such delicate things were rare. It played a lullaby, a simple melody that spoke of peace and comfort and safety. The tune was hauntingly beautiful, one of those melodies that seems to carry memory and emotion beyond mere notes. Viola would wind the music box and let it play as she put the girls to bed, the gentle chiming filling the room like a protective charm. The lullaby had special significance for Gascoigne. Perhaps it reminded him of his homeland, of simpler times before blood and beasts and endless hunting. Perhaps it was simply associated with his daughters, with the moments when he could be a father instead of a hunter. Whatever the reason, the melody seemed to calm something in him, to push back the bloodlust that built up during the hunt, to remind him of what he was protecting and why it mattered. On nights when Gascoigne returned home while the girls were still awake, they would greet him at the door, the older daughter running to embrace him despite his blood-stained clothes, the younger daughter reaching up to be held, and he would hold them, this man who hours before had been cleaving beasts in two, his rough hunter's hands gentle as they touched his daughter's soft hair. For those moments, the transformation that was slowly consuming him would recede. He wasn't becoming a beast. He was a father. And fathers protected their children. Fathers came home. Fathers didn't lose themselves to bloodlust and rage. Gascoigne tried to be present during the days. After a long hunt, when Henryk had gone to his own rest and the dawn had made the streets relatively safe, Gascoigne would return home and collapse into exhausted sleep. But when he woke in the afternoon, he would spend whatever hours remained before the next hunt with his family. He would watch his daughters play. He would help Viola with household tasks. He would try desperately to be more than just a hunter who happened to have a family on the side. The girls became his anchor. When the bloodlust became overwhelming, when the line between hunting beasts and becoming one himself seemed dangerously thin, he would think of them, their faces, their laughter, the way the older daughter would seriously explain to her younger sister how things worked, taking on a teaching role despite being barely old enough to understand things herself, the way the younger daughter would toddle around the house, exploring everything with fearless curiosity. These memories were his lifeline, the thread connecting him to his humanity. But children grow and ask questions. The older daughter began to notice things. She noticed how her father's hands shook sometimes, even when he wasn't tired. She noticed the way he would stare at nothing, lost in thoughts he never shared. She noticed that the clothes he wore for hunting had a smell that never quite washed out, something acrid and wrong that made her wrinkle her nose. She noticed that sometimes, when Mother thought they weren't listening, she would cry quietly while watching Father prepare for the night's hunt. Viola tried to explain in ways the girls could understand. Father was keeping them safe. There were bad things in the city, but Father made sure those bad things couldn't hurt them. It was important work, dangerous work. But someone had to do it. And their father was brave and strong and skilled. He would always come back to them. He promised. The older daughter took to watching from the window on the hunt nights. Viola would tell her to stay away from the windows, that it wasn't safe to look out during the hunt. But the girl was stubborn. She would peek through cracks in the shutters, watching the shadows move in the street below, trying to spot her father among the hunters prowling the night. Sometimes she would see figures that might have been him, axe in hand, moving with purpose through the Gothic streets. Sometimes she would see beasts, and she would press her hand to her mouth to keep from crying out, terrified that those creatures might hurt her. Father. The younger daughter was easier to protect from the truth. She was content to be held, to listen to stories, to play with simple toys. When the hunt bells rang, Viola would gather both girls close, would wind the music box, and would sit with them as the lullaby played over and over, drowning out the sounds of violence from outside. The melody became a shield, a boundary between the safe warmth of home and the cold horror of Yharnam's night. Gascoigne gave Viola the music box to keep with her at all times. He told her it was important, though he never fully explained why. Perhaps even then some part of him knew what was coming. Perhaps he felt the beast growing stronger inside him and wanted his family to have a weapon against it, something that could reach him if his humanity began to slip. Or perhaps it was simpler than that. The music box represented his family, his love for them, the life he was trying to protect. As long as Viola had it, as long as the melody could still play, there was hope. The family developed rituals that became sacred to them. Before each hunt, Gascoigne would kiss his daughters goodnight. He would tell them he loved them and that he would be back in the morning. The older daughter would make him promise, extracting the words from him like a binding oath, and he would promise, meaning it every time, believing it every time, never acknowledging the growing likelihood that one night he might not be able to keep that promise. After he left, Viola would gather the girls and they would say a prayer, not to the healing church's gods or the great ones that some whispered about. Just a simple prayer that father would be safe, that he would come home, that the night would end and morning would arrive. And then they would wind the music box and the lullaby would fill their small home, a fragile barrier of sound against the howling darkness outside. For a time, this was enough. The family existed in the spaces between hunts, in the hours of daylight, in the moments when love proved stronger than fear. Gascoigne fought to maintain this, to keep his two lives separate, the brutal hunter and the gentle father. But the separation was becoming harder. The beastly stench was growing stronger. The bloodlust was becoming more difficult to control, and no amount of love, no matter how fierce, could hold back the transformation forever. The change in Gascoigne didn't happen all at once. It was subtle, gradual, the kind of transformation that's invisible from day to day, but undeniable when you step back and compare what was to what has become. The man who had come to Yharnam as a foreign cleric, full of faith and good intentions, was slowly being overwritten by something darker, something that lived for the hunt and craved the blood. It started with small things. His temper, which had always been controlled, began to fray. A knocked-over cup would spark irritation that seemed disproportionate. A crying child would set his teeth on edge in ways it hadn't before. Viola would see him clench his fists and force himself to breathe deeply, fighting back reactions that wanted to explode outward. He was still winning these battles, still maintaining control, but the effort was visible. The struggle was written on his face. His sleep became troubled. When he did manage to rest after a long hunt, it wasn't the peaceful oblivion of exhaustion. It was fitful, broken by nightmares he couldn't quite remember upon waking. Viola would wake to find him twitching, mumbling, sometimes crying out as if in combat. She would shake him awake, and he would jolt upright, wild-eyed, hand reaching for his axe before he recognized where he was. Then the confusion would clear and shame would replace it. He would apologize, try to explain it away as just the natural consequence of the hunter's life, nothing to worry about. But it was something to worry about. The nightmares were a symptom of something deeper. The line between hunting beasts and being a beast was blurring in his mind. In his dreams, he sometimes couldn't tell which side of the hunt he was on. Was he the hunter, axe in hand, pursuing his prey? Or was he the beast, hunted through Yharnam streets, running on all fours with claws extended? The dreams mixed together until making the distinction felt impossible. The beastly stench grew worse. It was mentioned, specifically in the description of his attire, a pungent smell that ate away at the fabric itself. No amount of washing could remove it. Viola tried everything, using every cleaning technique she knew, but the stench remained. It was in his clothes, in his skin, in his hair. It was the smell of the beasts he killed, yes, but it was also something more fundamental. It was the smell of the transformation working its way from inside out, of his very biology beginning to rebel against his humanity. His hunting behaviour changed too. Henryk noticed it first. Gascoigne was becoming more aggressive, taking unnecessary risks, pursuing beasts with a fury that went beyond professional necessity. After a beast was dead, Gascoigne would keep striking it, his axe rising and falling long after the threat was eliminated. Henryk would have to call out to him, sometimes physically pulling him back, reminding him that the beast was dead, that they needed to move on to other threats, and Gascoigne would stop, would look at the mutilated corpse at his feet with something like confusion, as if unsure how he'd gotten there. The bloodlust was becoming harder to shut down. During hunts, it was an asset. The fury fueled his fighting, made him faster, stronger, more deadly. But afterwards, when the hunt was done and he needed to become human again, the bloodlust didn't want to recede. It whispered to him, demanded more, suggested that the hunt didn't have to end just because dawn were approaching. There were always more beasts to kill. Why stop? Why rest? Why pretend to be civilized when violence felt so much more natural? He began to spend more time hunting and less time at home. Part of this was practical. As the scourge worsened, more hunters were needed on the streets. The beasts were multiplying faster than they could be killed. The healing church was calling for extended hunts, for hunters to stay out longer, to cover more ground. But part of it was also Gascoigne's growing reluctance to return home. At home, he had to be the man Viola had married, the father his daughters needed. On the hunt, he could be the thing he was becoming without judgment, without the painful comparison to what he used to be. Viola saw the changes. How could she not? Her husband was transforming before her eyes, becoming someone she struggled to recognize. But what could she do? Ask him to stop hunting? That would mean abandoning the city to the beasts, leaving innocents to die. Accept the transformation as inevitable? That felt like giving up, like betraying the man he had been. She found herself caught between impossible choices, watching helplessly as the man she loved eroded piece by piece. The older daughter noticed too. Children are perceptive about these things, able to sense shifts in emotional atmosphere that adults think they're hiding. She saw how father came home later and later. She saw how mother's smiles became forced when father was around. She saw how father's hands shook, worse than before, how he would stare at nothing for long minutes, how he seemed increasingly uncomfortable in his own skin. She didn't understand what it meant, but she knew something was wrong. Gascoigne tried to fight it. He would remind himself of his faith, his clerical background, the values he had brought from his homeland. He would pray, asking whatever gods might listen to help him maintain his humanity. He would force himself to skip hunts sometimes, to stay home and be with his family, to prove that he could still choose domestic life over the violence. But skipping hunts made the bloodlust worse. The need to hunt would build up inside him until it became physically painful to resist. And when he finally returned to the streets, his axe felt like an extension of his arm. The killing felt like coming home, and he would wonder why he'd ever tried to stop. Henryk tried to help. The old hunter had seen this transformation in others, had watched countless partners succumb to the scourge. He knew the signs. He tried talking to Gascoigne, suggesting he take a break from hunting, maybe leave Yharnam entirely while he still could. But Gascoigne refused. He had a family to protect. He couldn't leave them. And besides, he was fine. He was managing it. He was stronger than the others who had fallen. He would beat this. This denial was perhaps the clearest sign that he was losing. Hunters who were truly in control didn't need to insist they were fine. They didn't need to convince themselves and others that the transformation wasn't happening. But Gascoigne couldn't see it, or wouldn't see it. The beast was already rewriting his perceptions, making him believe he was still the man he had been even as that man disappeared. The music box became more important. On the rare occasions when Gascoigne felt himself losing control at home, when the bloodlust was rising and he could feel his grip on humanity slipping, Viola would wind the box, the lullaby would play, and something in Gascoigne would respond to it. The fury would recede, his breathing would slow, his clenched fists would unclench. For a few precious moments he would remember. He would see his daughters watching him with fear in their eyes, and shame would cut through the bloodlust like a blade. He would apologize, would promise to be better, would swear this would never happen again. But the episodes were becoming more frequent. The music box was needed more often, and each time it seemed slightly less effective, as if whatever humanity it was reaching was getting smaller, harder to access, buried deeper beneath layers of beastly instinct. Gascoigne's relationship with his own body became adversarial. He could feel the changes trying to manifest. His teeth felt wrong, slightly larger, sharper. His fingers would cramp as if trying to reshape themselves into claws. Hair growth accelerated, especially on his arms and back. His senses were changing too, smells becoming sharper, sounds clearer, especially the sounds of blood and violence and pain. He would catch himself tracking movements with predatory focus, his body instinctively calculating attack angles, his mind cataloguing the weak points of people he had no reason to consider as prey. He tried to hide these changes from his family. He would trim his nails obsessively, keeping them short. He would shave frequently, eliminating any extra hair growth. He would force himself to move like a human, to avoid the prowling, predatory gait that wanted to emerge. But these measures were cosmetic, treating symptoms while the disease progressed unchecked. You can't stop an internal transformation through external grooming. The Healing Church had protocols for hunters showing signs of beastly transformation. They were supposed to report themselves for evaluation, to be pulled from active duty before they became a threat. But Gascoigne didn't report. He told himself he was still effective, still in control. He told himself his family needed the income from hunting, needed his protection. He told himself he would quit soon, just a few more hunts, just a few more months. Every deteriorating hunter tells themselves the same lies, and every one of them believes those lies until it's too late. Henryk considered reporting Gascoigne himself. It would have been the responsible thing to do, the action that might save his partner's life and humanity. But Henryk was loyal to a fault. They were partners. They had saved each other's lives dozens of times. Gascoigne had fought beside him when other hunters would have fled. How could Henryk betray that? How could he condemn his friend to whatever fate the Healing Church imposed on transforming hunters? So Henryk stayed silent, hoping against hope that Gascoigne would pull through, that somehow he would be the exception to the rule that all hunters eventually fall. This was Henryk's tragedy too. By staying silent, by enabling Gascoigne's continued hunting, he was allowing the transformation to progress. His loyalty, his friendship, his reluctance to take definitive action when action was needed became complicit in the disaster that was approaching. Later, much later, Henryk would understand this, and the understanding would drive him to his own form of madness. But for now, they continued hunting together. Gascoigne's attacks became more savage. His combat style, already aggressive, became frenzied. He would charge into packs of beasts that should have been approached carefully. He would pursue wounded beasts long past the point where they were threats, hunting them down with single-minded intensity. And after each kill, he would stand over the corpse, breathing hard, axe dripping blood, his body language more beast than human. The tipping point was approaching. Everyone who knew Gascoigne could sense it. Viola would lie awake at night, listening to her husband's laboured breathing, wondering if this would be the night he didn't come back. Or, worse, wondering if this would be the night he came back as something else. If she would hear his footsteps on the stairs and the door would open to reveal not her husband but the beast wearing his shape. The older daughter started having nightmares. She would wake up crying, telling her mother about dreams where father had become a monster, where he came home with claws and fangs and eyes that didn't recognize them anymore. Viola would comfort her, would tell her it was just a dream, that father was fine, that everything would be all right. But the reassurances felt hollow even as she spoke them. If you're enjoying this descent into tragedy, this exploration of how good men become monsters, I'd really appreciate if you could hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. We've got so many more stories from Yharnam to explore, so many more dark corners to illuminate. Your support helps these videos reach other people who love deep dives into video game lore. Now let's continue with the story, because we're approaching the night when everything fell apart. The night Viola left her home would be the last night she would ever leave it. She didn't know this when she opened the door, didn't sense that stepping out into Yharnam's streets would seal her fate. She only knew that Gascoigne hadn't come home, and the worry had grown too great to bear alone. Usually, even after the longest hunts, Gascoigne would return by dawn. He would be exhausted, covered in blood and bruises, barely able to stand, but he would return. The girls would wake to find him slumped in a chair, too tired to make it to bed, but home, safe, still human. But this morning the dawn had come and gone, and the chair remained empty. Viola had waited through the afternoon, telling herself he was just resting at the hunter's dream or the workshop, that he would appear any moment. But evening approached, and still no Gascoigne. She made a decision that in retrospect seems doomed from the start, but in the moment must have felt necessary. She would go look for him. She would search the routes he typically patrolled, ask other hunters if they'd seen him, find out what had kept him out past dawn. She couldn't just sit in their home wondering, imagining the worst. She needed to know. Viola gathered her courage and her cloak. She told the older daughter to watch her younger sister, to keep the door locked, to not open it for anyone except mother or father. She would be back soon, she promised. The older daughter nodded, serious and frightened, understanding that mother going out alone was dangerous, that the streets of Yharnam were no place for citizens even in daylight. But mother had to find father. The girl understood that too. Before leaving, Viola took the music box. She slipped it into her cloak pocket, feeling its weight, its familiar shape. If she found Gascoigne and he was in one of his states, the bloodlust overwhelming him, the music might calm him. It had worked before. It would work again. It had to work again. The streets of Yharnam were quieter during the day, but never truly safe. Citizens moved quickly between destinations, eyes down, avoiding attention. The smell of incense was everywhere, warding off beastly influence, or at least making people feel like they were doing something protective. Viola moved through these streets asking questions. Had anyone seen her husband? The hunter with the axe? The foreign one who usually worked with old Henryk? Most people refused to answer, refused to even acknowledge her questions. Getting involved in other people's business was dangerous in Yharnam. Information could be as deadly as beast attacks. But eventually she found someone who had seen Gascoigne. A citizen who'd been watching from behind barred windows during the hunt reported seeing him near the Tomb of Oedon, fighting with unusual savagery even for him. He'd been alone, separated from Henryk for reasons unknown. And he'd been acting strangely, pursuing beasts with what looked like hunger rather than duty, his movements less like a hunter and more like another beast competing for territory. The Tomb of Oedon. Viola knew the location, a cemetery not far from their home. It was one of Gascoigne's regular patrol routes, a place where beasts congregated and therefore needed regular culling. If he was there, if he was in trouble or injured or simply lost in bloodlust, she could reach him. She could bring him home. She made her way to the tomb as dusk approached. This was foolish, suicidally foolish, and part of her knew it. Citizens didn't go out as darkness fell. They locked themselves inside and waited for dawn. But Viola's love for Gascoigne overrode her survival instinct. She had to find him. She had to help him. What kind of wife would she be if she stayed safe while her husband was lost somewhere in his own mind? The Tomb of Oedon was a place of ancient stone and newer graves, a layering of death upon death stretching back centuries. Monuments rose like crooked teeth, casting long shadows as the last light faded. The air smelled of earth and decay and something else, something animal and wrong. Viola moved carefully between the tombstones, calling Gascoigne's name softly, not wanting to attract attention from any beast that might be lurking. She found signs of recent combat. Blood splashed across stone, deep gouges in the ground where something heavy had struck. Bodies, both beast and human, scattered across the cemetery. The carnage was extensive, suggesting a prolonged battle or perhaps multiple encounters, and all of it bore the hallmark of Gascoigne's fighting style. Brutal overhead strikes, no finesse, just overwhelming force applied until nothing remained to strike. Then she saw him, or what remained of him. The figure standing among the graves was Gascoigne in body but not in spirit. His coat was torn and soaked with blood. His axe was extended to its full length, gripped in hands that had become more claw than human. His breathing was laboured, animalistic, and, when he turned toward the sound of her approach, his eyes were wrong. Not fully beast eyes, not yet, but not human either. Something in between. Something that looked at Viola not as a husband looks at his wife, but as a predator looks at prey. Gascoigne, Viola's voice shook. She took a step forward, hand reaching toward him. It's me, it's Viola. I've come to bring you home. The figure that had been Gascoigne tilted its head, an animal gesture, as if trying to place where he'd heard that voice before. Recognition flickered across his features, brief and painful, a moment where the man inside fought to surface. Then the bloodlust crashed back down, drowning that recognition, and he raised his axe. Viola fumbled for the music box with desperate fingers. She wound it quickly, ignoring how her hands shook, how her breath came in panicked gasps. The box opened and the lullaby began to play, those familiar notes filling the tomb, cutting through the gathering darkness like a lifeline, thrown to a drowning man. The effect was immediate. Gascoigne froze, axe raised mid-strike, his head jerked as if struck. The animalistic posture shifted, became more human. His breathing slowed. The recognition returned to his eyes, stronger this time, fighting against the beast for control. For a moment, just a moment, he was himself again. He saw Viola. He remembered who she was, what she meant to him. Horror crossed his face as he realized what he'd been about to do. Viola! The word came out mangled, half growl, but it was her name. He recognized her. He was still in there. She stepped closer, hope surging. Yes, it's me. Come home. Our daughters are waiting. Please, come home. But the music box could only do so much. It could reach the man inside, could give him moments of clarity, but it couldn't stop the transformation. It couldn't reverse what was already happening. The beast was too strong, too far advanced, and Gascoigne's body was already more beast than human, the change too deep to be undone by a simple melody. What happened next is pieced together from evidence found later, from the position of the bodies, from the blood patterns on the stones. The exact sequence is lost to darkness and violence, but the result is undeniable. In the Tomb of Oedon, on a night when the moon was full and the hunt was called, Gascoigne killed his wife. Did he have moments of clarity during it? Did he understand what he was doing, even as he couldn't stop himself? Or had the beast taken over completely, making Viola just another target, another thing that smelled of blood and fear as life? We'll never know. The dead keep their secrets, and Gascoigne's mind was too fractured to provide answers. What we do know is that when it was over, when the killing was done, Viola's body lay broken among the tombstones, and standing over her corpse was something that looked like Gascoigne, but was already well on its way to becoming something else entirely. The music box lay beside Viola's body, still playing, the mechanism not yet run down, the lullaby continuing its gentle melody even as blood pooled on the ancient stones. The man who had been a foreign cleric, who had become a hunter to protect people, who had found love and built a family in the cursed city, had just killed the woman he loved. And somewhere in the fractured remains of his consciousness, he knew it. The knowledge was there, sharp and terrible, adding one more wound to a psyche that was already breaking apart. But knowing didn't change anything. The transformation was too far advanced. The beast was taking over, consuming what remained of Gascoigne's humanity, using his grief and horror as fuel for the final change. By dawn, the man would be gone entirely. Only the beast would remain, prowling the Tomb of Oedon, killing anything that came near, wearing Gascoigne's face like a mask. Back at the small home in central Yharnam, two young girls waited by a window. They waited for mother to return. They waited for father to come home. They didn't know that they would never see either parent again. They didn't know that their family had just been destroyed completely and irreversibly. They just waited, hope slowly turning to fear, fear turning to desperation as the night wore on and the door stayed closed. The tragedy was complete, or so it might have seemed. But this was just the beginning. The destruction of the Gascoigne family was thorough and comprehensive, leaving no one untouched, claiming every life one way or another. Viola's death was just the first domino falling. The others would follow, each in turn, until nothing remained but corpses and grief. When you arrive at the Tomb of Oedon as a hunter yourself, you're walking into the aftermath of this tragedy. The blood on the stones is dry now, days old, but the violence is still fresh. Bodies litter the cemetery, some beast, some human, all killed with the same brutal efficiency. And somewhere among the tombstones, you hear him before you see him, heavy breathing, the sound of an axe scraping against stone, muttering in a voice that's barely human anymore. Then he emerges from behind a monument, and you get your first clear look at Father Gascoigne. The hunt has consumed him. The transformation is nearly complete. He moves with an animal's gait, prowling rather than walking, his body language speaking of barely restrained violence. The hunter's garb still clings to his frame, but it's torn and blood-soaked, more like a beast's pelt than clothing. His hunter's hat somehow remains in place, a last absurd vestige of the man he used to be. You see his face beneath the hat's shadow, and it's a mask of madness. His eyes are wild, unfocused, seeing threats everywhere. His teeth are visible, bared in a perpetual snarl. Recognition is gone from those eyes. The capacity to see you as another human, another hunter, has been stripped away. You're just prey, another beast to be killed in the endless hunt. Beasts all over the shop. His voice is rough, strained, the words forced out through a throat that's forgetting how to form human speech. You'll be one of them, sooner or later. The statement is projection. He's talking to you, but he's also talking to himself, to the man he used to be. Every hunter becomes a beast eventually. He knows this better than anyone now. He's living proof, and his warning to you is also a lament for himself, an acknowledgement that the transformation he fought against has finally won. Then he attacks. The fight with Father Gascoigne is divided into 3 distinct phases, each representing a further stage of his descent into beasthood. In the first phase, he still retains some humanity. He fights like a hunter using actual techniques, showing tactical awareness. His axe swings are calculated, his positioning strategic. He uses his blunderbuss to create distance and interrupt your attacks. He's aggressive but not mindless, deadly but not completely feral. This is Gascoigne the hunter fighting you, the man who partnered with Henryk, who cleared Yharnam's streets of beasts, who once protected innocent citizens. Some muscle memory remains, some ingrained combat patterns that don't require conscious thought to execute. But even in this first phase, the beast is visible beneath the hunter. His movements are too aggressive, too relentless. He doesn't pace himself or conserve stamina. He just keeps attacking, pressing forward, overwhelming through sheer fury. As the fight progresses and his health diminishes, you can see the transformation accelerating. The hunter techniques give way to pure bestial fury. His attacks become wilder, less predictable. He starts mixing in moves that are more animal than human, swiping with his hands between axe strikes, sometimes dropping the weapon entirely to lunge with claws extended. The line between hunter and beast is erasing itself in real time as you fight him. If you have the tiny music box, the item found in his home, you can use it during this fight. When you play the lullaby, Gascoigne freezes. His whole body goes rigid. The axe drops slightly. For a few precious seconds, something human emerges in his eyes. The melody reaches whatever fragment of the man still exists inside the beast, pulling him back from the edge, forcing him to remember. But the music box can only be used sparingly. Use it too many times, and it triggers the final transformation. The lullaby that once calmed him becomes the thing that pushes him over the edge, perhaps because the reminder of what he's lost is too painful to bear. The music represents his family, his daughters, Viola, everything he destroyed, and the beast inside him can't tolerate that reminder, can't face what it's done, so it silences the memory the only way it knows how, by completing the transformation. The third phase is when Gascoigne becomes the cleric beast Gascoigne. when the last vestiges of humanity are shed and only the monster remains. His body transforms visibly, fur sprouting, limbs extending, face elongating into a muzzle. He drops his axe because he doesn't need it anymore. His own body has become the weapon. He drops to all fours, moving with terrifying speed, attacking with claws and fangs and pure, overwhelming force. This is what every hunter fears becoming. This is the end point of the transformation, the final destination of the path they're all walking. Gascoigne fought it longer than most. His faith, his family, his strength of will, all bought him time. But in the end, none of it mattered. The beast won. It always wins eventually. Every hunter who lives long enough becomes this, a mindless creature that attacks anything that moves, that lives only for blood and violence, that has no memory of the person it used to be. Fighting Beast Gascoigne is pure survival. There's no strategy beyond dodge and attack, no complex pattern to learn. He just comes at you with relentless aggression, using the environment of the Tomb of Oedon against you, backing you into corners among the tombstones, giving you no breathing room, no moment to recover. This is what the hunt becomes when the hunter becomes the hunted, when the protector becomes the threat, when the line between human and beast is finally, irrevocably crossed, when you finally bring him down, when the beast that was once Father Gascoigne falls among the same tombstones where he killed his wife. There's no triumph in it, only sadness, only the recognition that you've just put down a man who fought to protect others, who tried to maintain his humanity, who loved his family desperately, a man who did everything right and still lost. Because in Yharnam, doing everything right is never enough. The scourge takes everyone eventually. The only variable is how long you can hold out. His body reverts partially after death, the beast transformation receding enough that you can see the man beneath. The weathered hunter's garb is still there, torn and blood-soaked. The hat remains somehow, a dignified touch on an undignified corpse. His face, no longer twisted in rage, looks almost peaceful. Or perhaps just empty. The struggle is over. The transformation is complete. And whether that's mercy or tragedy depends on your perspective. You can take his belongings, his ashes, which can be used to fortify your own weapons, a badge that marks him as having once served the healing church, the knowledge of how to wield an axe like he did, how to transform it between forms with practiced efficiency. These are the material remains of Father Gascoigne, reduced to items in a hunter's inventory, his life and struggle, compressed into gameplay mechanics. But the real tragedy isn't his death, it's what his death means for those who survive him. Because the Gascoigne family's destruction isn't over, it's just entering its next phase. Viola is dead in the tomb. Gascoigne is dead by your hand. But back in central Yharnam, two young girls still wait by a window, still hope their parents will come home. They don't know yet that they're orphans. They don't know that the next phase of their tragedy is just beginning. The Tomb of Oedon will remember this night. The blood will soak into the ancient stones, adding one more layer to centuries of death. Other hunters will come through and see the carnage, will piece together what happened, will shake their heads and think, there but for the grace of whatever gods still listen, go I. Because Gascoigne's story is every hunter's story, just accelerated, compressed, made visible. He's a warning of what awaits them all if they hunt long enough, and they all know it, but they keep hunting anyway, because the beasts need to be killed, and someone has to do it, and the cycle continues, claiming new victims, creating new tragedies, forever and always until someone finally breaks it. After you defeat Father Gascoigne, if you explore the area around the Tomb of Oedon, you'll find a small window. Approach it and you'll hear a voice, a young girl's voice calling out into the night. "Are you a hunter? Have you seen my mum? She went out to find my dad and she hasn't come back yet." This is the older daughter, the one with the red ribbon in her hair, the one who watched from windows, who made her father promise to come home, who had nightmares about him becoming a monster. Those nightmares have come true now, though she doesn't know it yet. She's still in the stage of hoping, still believing there's a possibility of a happy ending, still waiting for parents who will never return. She can't see you clearly through the window. Yharnam's citizens keep their shutters mostly closed during the hunt, only small cracks allowing them to peer out and communicate with hunters passing by. She sees your silhouette, sees that you're a hunter, and hope surges in her voice. Hunters are supposed to help people. Hunters are supposed to keep everyone safe. Maybe this hunter has seen her parents. Maybe this hunter can help bring them home. You can talk to her. You can lie to her. You can tell her that her mother went to the Oedon Chapel, a place of sanctuary where citizens can shelter during the hunt. It's a kind lie, meant to give the girl hope, to send her somewhere safe. Because what else can you tell her? The truth? That you just killed her father after he transformed into a beast? That her mother's corpse is cooling in the tomb nearby, killed by those same bestial hands? What purpose would that truth serve except to destroy what little innocence this child has left? So you lie. You tell her that Oedon Chapel is safe, that she should go there, that she might find her mother there. The girl is hesitant. She's been told not to go outside during the hunt. But the need to find her mother, the desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, everything will be all right if she can just reach the chapel, overrides her caution. She agrees. She'll go to Oedon Chapel. She'll find her mum there. Before she goes, she gives you something. The tiny music box. The same music box her mother carried. The one that played the lullaby that calmed her father. But the girl doesn't know that connection. To her, it's just a precious family possession. Something valuable enough to give to the hunter who's helping her. A token of trust and gratitude. She winds it before giving it to you, and the lullaby plays. Those same notes that once brought moments of peace to the Gascoigne family, that represented everything they loved about each other. "This is our secret," she tells you. "Our lullaby. Give this to my dad when you find him. It'll make him remember. It'll bring him home." The dramatic irony is almost unbearable. You've already found her father. You've already killed him. The music box that she thinks will save him was part of what drove him to his final transformation. There is no happy reunion waiting. There is no moment where the lullaby brings him back from the edge and they all go home together. That possibility died in the Tomb of Oedon, along with Viola and the man Gascoigne used to be. The girl sets out for Oedon Chapel. You can track her journey if you're quick enough, can follow her progress through the dangerous streets of central Yharnam. She's brave, or perhaps just desperate enough that bravery and desperation become indistinguishable. She moves through streets that adult hunters fear to tread, a small figure in a nightmare city, seeking a sanctuary that might not even be real. But she never makes it to Oedon Chapel. The journey is too dangerous. The streets are filled with beasts, and she's just a small girl with no weapons, no training, no way to defend herself. At some point along her journey, she encounters something she can't escape from. Perhaps a beast, Perhaps something worse. The exact nature of her death is left ambiguous, but the result is clear. Later you can find her corpse, not near the chapel, not even close, just lying in the street, another victim of Yharnam's endless night. Her white ribbon is still in her hair, that bright splash of colour now contrasting with the blood and death around her. She's still holding the music box you gave back to her, or perhaps she dropped it nearby. The mechanism has run down. The lullaby is silent, and the girl who sang it, who waited for parents who had never come home, has joined them in death. But that's if she went to Oedon Chapel. There's another possibility, another branching path in this tragedy. If you tell her the truth, if you're honest about where her mother is, the story changes. Not for the better, just differently terrible. You can tell her that her mother is in the Tomb of Oedon. This is technically true. Viola's corpse is there, lying among the tombstones, but the girl doesn't understand what this means. She thinks her mother is there and alive, perhaps injured, perhaps hiding, but alive and waiting. So she goes to the tomb instead of the chapel, taking a different dangerous journey through different dangerous streets. And in the tomb she finds her mother, or what remains of her, Viola's broken body lying on the blood-stained stones. The older daughter sees this and something inside her breaks. The shock, the grief, the absolute horror of finding her mother's corpse in this terrible place. It's too much for a child to process. The mind has defense mechanisms against trauma this severe, and one of those mechanisms is denial, the refusal to accept what you're seeing even when the evidence is overwhelming. The girl refuses to believe her mother is dead. She can't be dead. She's just sleeping, just resting. She'll wake up soon. They'll go home together. Everything will be fine. The girl's mind creates this fiction to protect itself, wrapping the unbearable truth in comfortable lies. And in this state of shock and denial, she stays with the body, refuses to leave, stays in the Tomb of Oedon as night deepens and the dangers multiply. You can find her there if you return to the tomb. She's sitting next to Viola's corpse, talking to it as if her mother can hear, telling her they need to go home soon, that father will be worried, that they should leave before it gets too dark. Her voice is disconnected from reality, speaking words that make sense in her fractured understanding, but have no connection to the truth of her situation. There's nothing you can do for her at this point. The trauma has broken something essential in her mind. Even if you could get her to leave the tomb, to go somewhere safe, the damage is done. She's lost not just her parents, but her grip on reality itself. And in Yharnam, that kind of break is essentially a death sentence. What happens to her after that is unclear. Perhaps she stays in the tomb until a beast finds her. Perhaps she wanders away in her shocked state and meets her end somewhere else in the city. Perhaps some other hunter finds her and tries to help, though what help could be offered to someone so completely broken? The game doesn't provide definitive answers, but the implications are clear. The older daughter doesn't survive. She can't survive. The world has become too terrible for someone so young and traumatized to navigate. But remember, there were two daughters, the older one with the white ribbon, and the younger one with the red ribbon still back at the house, still waiting. What happened to her? The younger daughter was left at home when Viola went searching for Gascoigne. The older sister was supposed to watch her, to keep her safe, to maintain the small bubble of normalcy that their mother had worked so hard to create. But then the older sister left too, either going to Oedon Chapel or the Tomb of Oedon, depending on what you told her. Either way, she left the younger daughter alone. Alone in a house in central Yharnam during the hunt, with no parents to protect her and no older sister to at least provide companionship. Just a small child, probably terrified, definitely confused about why everyone has left, why no one has come back, why the door stays closed and the street outside stays dangerous and the dawn keeps not coming. There are theories about what happened to the younger daughter. Some players report finding a small corpse in the house, suggesting she died there, either from starvation after waiting too long or from something that broke through the doors and windows she was told would keep her safe. Other players report never finding any trace of her, leading to speculation that she somehow survived, that she's still waiting somewhere, that her fate is left deliberately ambiguous. But in a story this thoroughly tragic, ambiguity about survival isn't really ambiguity at all. In Yharnam, when someone's fate is unclear, it's safe to assume that fate was terrible. The city doesn't produce happy endings. It doesn't spare children just because they're innocent. The younger daughter's exact fate might be uncertain, but the general shape of it is clear. She was alone, helpless, in one of the most dangerous places in the world, with no one to protect her or even know she needed protection. That's not a situation anyone survives, so the Gascoigne family is destroyed, completely, comprehensively, every member dead, every hope extinguished, every bond broken. Father transformed into a beast and killed by a hunter. Mother killed by her transformed husband. Older daughter dead in the streets or the tomb, her mind broken by trauma. Younger daughter dead in the house or disappeared into Yharnam's darkness. An entire family erased from existence in the span of a few nights. There's one more piece to this tragedy though. One more person connected to the Gascoigne family whose fate needs to be addressed. Someone who had to live with the knowledge of what happened, who carried the weight of all these deaths, who let his loyalty and friendship blind him to warning signs he should have acted on. Henryk, the old hunter, Gascoigne's partner, had his own reckoning coming. Henryk had been hunting since the early days of the Scourge. He had seen countless hunters fall to the transformation, had watched partners and friends succumb to the beast within. Experience should have prepared him for Gascoigne's fall. But knowledge doesn't equal immunity from grief. Understanding what happened doesn't make it hurt less. When Henryk learned that Gascoigne had transformed fully and been killed, something in him broke. Or perhaps it had been breaking for years and this was simply the final crack. His partnership with Gascoigne hadn't just been professional. They'd been friends, as close as hunters could be to each other in a city where everyone was slowly losing their humanity. They had trusted each other with their lives. They had fought side by side through countless hunts, and Henryk had failed to save his friend from the fate they both knew was coming. Guilt consumed him. He had seen the signs, the increasing aggression, the beastly stench, the bloodlust, becoming harder to control. He had known Gascoigne was slipping, had seen the transformation progressing, and he had done nothing. He hadn't reported Gascoigne to the healing church. He hadn't tried to stop him from hunting. He hadn't done anything except watch his friend descend into beasthood and tell himself that somehow it would be different this time, that Gascoigne would beat it. And then he learned about Viola, about how Gascoigne had killed his own wife in the Tomb of Oedon, about how the woman Henryk had known, who he'd probably met at Gascoigne's home, who had been kind and brave and so desperately in love with a man who was slowly becoming a monster, had died by that monster's hands. The guilt became sharper, more personal. If Henryk had acted sooner, if he had gotten Gascoigne pulled from the hunt, Viola might still be alive. the family might still be intact. The daughter's fates added more weight to his guilt. Two young girls, orphaned by the transformation their father couldn't stop and Henryk couldn't prevent. Whether they died quickly or suffered before the end, whether their deaths were merciful or prolonged, didn't really matter. They were dead. Children dead because Henryk had been too loyal, too hopeful, too unwilling to betray his friend even when betrayal might have been the kindest thing he could do. Henryk's grief manifested as rage. Rage at himself. Rage at the scourge. Rage at the healing church for creating the system that turned men into monsters. Rage at Yharnam itself for existing, for luring people in with promises of miracles and then destroying them systematically. The rage had nowhere to go, no outlet, no target worthy of the fury building inside him. So it turned inward, eating at his sanity the way the scourge ate at Hunter's humanity. He became obsessed with Gascoigne's memory. He would return to the Tomb of Oedon and stand where Gascoigne fell, replaying the events in his mind, torturing himself with alternate histories where he did things differently. He collected relics of his fallen friend, scraps of his clothing, pieces of his axe, anything that connected to the man he had failed to save. These became talismans, objects he would touch and hold, as if physical connection to Gascoigne's possessions could somehow bridge the gap between living and dead. His hunting changed. Where before he'd been methodical and careful, now he became reckless. He would charge into situations that should have been approached cautiously, would take unnecessary risks, would push himself beyond reasonable limits. It was as if he was trying to die, seeking the same fate Gascoigne met, hoping that if he fell in the hunt it would somehow balance the scales, would atone for his failure to prevent his friend's fall, but death wouldn't come for him. He was too skilled, too experienced, too hardened by decades of hunting. He survived encounters that should have killed him. He walked away from battles that left him broken and bleeding but still breathing. His tragically long life continued, each day another burden, each survival another failure. He wanted to die but couldn't. The universe seemed determined to keep him alive specifically so he could suffer the knowledge of what he'd failed to prevent. The guilt and grief transformed into something darker. Madness, perhaps, though in Yharnam the line between madness and sanity was so blurred as to be meaningless. Henryk began to see Gascoigne everywhere, in the shadows between hunts, in the faces of beasts he killed, in his dreams and waking visions both. His dead friend haunted him, not as a ghost, but as a presence that wouldn't fade, a reminder that wouldn't let him forget even for a moment. Other hunters noticed the change. Henryk had always been taciturn, but now he was something else entirely, disconnected, isolated, dangerous in ways that had nothing to do with his skill at killing beasts. He would mutter to himself during hunts, carrying on conversations with Gascoigne as if his dead partner was still beside him, still offering advice and strategy. When other hunters tried to talk to him, tried to snap him out of his spiral, he would react with hostility, pushing away any help, any human connection that might have pulled him back from the edge. Eventually, Henryk's isolation led him to the Oedon chapel. Not the chapel itself, but the area outside it, the Tomb of Oedon where Gascoigne fell. He had visited the place before, but now he stayed there, making it his territory, standing guard over the site of his greatest failure. Perhaps he thought he was honouring Gascoigne's memory. Perhaps he was punishing himself by forcing himself to confront the place where it all went wrong. Perhaps his fractured mind believed that if he stayed long enough, fought hard enough, killed enough beasts in this place, it would somehow change what happened, would rewrite the past into something less terrible. But Yharnam doesn't allow for redemption through violence. The city takes and takes and never gives back. Henryk's vigil accomplished nothing except his own continued suffering. He encountered a new hunter eventually, a hunter wearing a crow's mask, a member of the Hunters of Hunters, those specialists who track down other hunters who'd become too dangerous, who had lost themselves to bloodlust or madness or transformation. This crow hunter, Eileen, recognized what Henryk had become. Not a beast, not yet, but something almost as dangerous. A hunter who had lost all reason to stop hunting, who fought now purely from grief and guilt, who had become a threat to himself and potentially others. The confrontation between Henryk and Eileen happens in or near the Tomb of Oedon, the same place where Gascoigne fell. There's dark poetry in that. Henryk's final battle taking place where his friend's final battle occurred. The two partners meeting the same fate in the same location, separated by time but connected by tragedy. Henryk fights with the skill of decades of experience, but also with the recklessness of someone who doesn't care if they die. He's aggressive, relentless, using the same combat instincts that kept him alive for so long. But he's also broken, his movements just slightly off, his timing affected by the madness that's consumed him. And when you encounter this battle, when you see Eileen fighting this old hunter who should have retired years ago but was trapped by circumstances and grief into continuing, there's no glory in it, only sadness. Henryk falls in the Tomb of Oedon. His tragically long life finally ends in the same place where his partner's life ended. His body collapses among the same tombstones, his blood mixing with soil already saturated with Gascoigne's blood, with Viola's blood, with the blood of countless others who died in this cursed place. And with his death, the last living connection to the Gascoigne family is severed. His equipment can be collected after his death. His armour resistant to bolt damage, his weapons, his hunter's bone, an item that allows for quickened movement. These are the material remains of Henryk, reduced to gameplay items, his decades of experience and all his grief, compressed into things a player can use to become stronger. The story of his life and his failure and his guilt becomes nothing more than loot. But Henryk's true legacy isn't his equipment, it's his warning. He shows what happens to those who survive when everyone they care about falls. He demonstrates that sometimes surviving is worse than dying, that carrying the weight of failure and guilt can be more destructive than any beast transformation. He proves that in Yharnam there are fates worse than becoming a beast, like remaining human while everything human around you is destroyed. Let's step back and look at the full scope of the Gascoigne family's annihilation, because it's not just that everyone died, it's how they died. It's the systematic, comprehensive way in which every member of the family was destroyed, each death building on the previous ones, each tragedy enabling the next, until nothing remained but corpses and grief. Gascoigne transformed. The loving father, the foreign cleric who came to Yharnam with good intentions, the hunter who tried to protect people, became the very thing he hunted. All his faith, all his strength, all his love for his family couldn't stop the transformation. The scourge took him piece by piece until the man was gone and only the beast remained. His death was inevitable from the moment he took up the hunter axe, but that inevitability doesn't make it less tragic. Viola died trying to save him. She left the safety of their home, ventured into the dangerous streets, made her way to the Tomb of Oedon, all because she loved Gascoigne enough to try reaching him even when he was lost. The music box should have worked. It had worked before, but this time it wasn't enough, and the man she loved killed her. Her death was both murder and suicide, both an act of violence and a consequence of love. She died because she wouldn't give up on Gascoigne, wouldn't accept that he was too far gone to save. The older daughter died seeking her mother. She left the relative safety of their home because the not knowing was worse than the danger. She braved Yharnam's nightmare streets, either heading toward Oedon Chapel or toward the Tomb of Oedon, depending on what you told her. Either way, she never made it to safety. Either she was killed by beasts or she found her mother's corpse and broke, but the result was the same. A child dead because she loved her parents too much to stop looking for them. The younger daughter died alone. Whether she stayed in the house waiting for a family that would never return, or whether she tried to follow her sister and met her own death in the streets, she died. A child too young to understand what was happening, too small to protect herself, too innocent to deserve any of what happened to her. She died because she was part of the Gascoigne family, and being part of that family had become a death sentence. Henryk died from grief and guilt. His madness, his recklessness, his tragically long life all stemmed from his failure to save Gascoigne. He survived decades of hunting only to be destroyed by the knowledge of what he could have prevented but didn't. His death in the Tomb of Oedon was both an ending and a release, the conclusion of suffering that had become unbearable. 5 people, connected by blood and friendship and love, all destroyed, not quickly, not mercifully, but through a cascading series of tragedies where each death created the conditions for the next. Gascoigne's transformation led to Viola's death. Viola's death led to the older daughter's death. The parents' deaths led to the younger daughter's death. All the deaths together led to Henryk's destruction. The family was dismantled person by person, relationship by relationship, until nothing remained. And what did any of it accomplish? What was the point? Gascoigne hunted to protect people, and in doing so became something that killed people. Viola tried to save her husband, and her attempt led to her murder. The older daughter tried to find her parents, and the search led to her death. Henryk tried to be a good partner, and his loyalty contributed to the disaster. Every action taken with good intentions, every choice made from love or duty or honour, led to destruction. This is the heart of Bloodborne's tragedy. It's not just that bad things happen to good people. It's that good people's best qualities, their love and loyalty and determination and hope, become the mechanisms of their own destruction. Gascoigne's devotion to his family made his transformation more tragic. Viola's love made her venture into danger. The daughter's hope made them vulnerable. Henryk's friendship made him complicit. The things that should have saved them became the things that destroyed them. The Gascoigne family's story is Yharnam in microcosm. A city built on blood promises healing but delivers transformation. A system designed to protect people feeds them into a meat grinder. The more you love, the more you lose. The harder you fight, the more certainly you become the thing you're fighting. The hunt promises to save humanity but systematically destroys every human who participates in it. There's no villain in this story beyond the scourge itself, beyond the system, beyond the city and its cursed blood. Gascoigne did everything he could to protect his family and failed. Viola loved deeply and died for it. The daughters were innocent and were killed anyway. Henryk tried to be loyal and was destroyed by that loyalty. No one made evil choices. No one was cruel or selfish or malicious. They were just people trying to survive and love and protect each other in a world that wouldn't allow any of those things. And in the end, all that remains are possessions. Gascoigne's ashes and equipment, available for you to purchase or collect. The tiny music box, now just an item in your inventory. Its power to calm beasts noted mechanically, without reference to what that power meant to a family now destroyed. Viola's body lying in the Tomb of Oedon, unremarked upon, except as evidence of what happened. The daughters reduced to NPCs with tragic quest lines, their entire lives compressed into a few lines of dialogue and an item reward. The complete destruction of the Gascoigne family becomes just another part of the world building, another piece of lore for players to discover and discuss. Their tragedy is content for videos like this one, for wiki entries, for forum discussions. The game moves on. Other hunters come through the Tomb of Oedon, fight the beast that was once Father Gascoigne, collect his items and continue their own hunts, beginning their own inevitable descents toward the same fate. Nothing was learned from the Gascoigne family's destruction. Nothing changed. The hunt continues. More hunters transform. More families are destroyed. The cycle repeats endlessly, claiming new victims, creating new tragedies, and Yharnam just keeps turning, keeps hunting, keeps destroying everyone who tries to live within its borders. This is why the Gascoigne family story is so perfectly tragic. Not just because everyone dies, but because their deaths mean nothing. The city doesn't learn. The system doesn't change. The scourge continues. Other hunters see what happened to Gascoigne and think, I'll be different, or I'll be more careful, or I can stop before it's too late. But they can't. The transformation is inevitable for everyone who hunts long enough. And knowing this, understanding it intellectually, doesn't provide any defense against it. The beast takes everyone eventually. The Gascoigne family died, and Yharnam didn't even notice. Their home stands empty now, another abandoned building in a city full of them. The Tomb of Oedon remains a place of violence and death. Other hunters patrol the same routes Gascoigne once walked. The music box's lullaby can still calm beasts temporarily, but the family that made that melody meaningful is gone. Everything continues as if they never existed, as if their love and struggle and suffering and death were just background noise in a city full of screams. As we come to the end of Father Gascoigne's story, we're left with questions that resist easy answers. Questions about the nature of inevitability, about whether fighting against fate is noble or futile, about what it means to maintain humanity in a world designed to strip it away. Questions about love and duty and the price we pay for both. Questions about whether any of it matters if the ending is always the same. Gascoigne's story is told through fragments, item descriptions, environmental details, a boss fight with 3 distinct phases, a music box that plays a lullaby, dialogue from his daughter, a confrontation between his former partner and a hunter of hunters. The game never explicitly lays out the complete narrative. You have to piece it together yourself, have to find the connections between disparate elements, have to fill in the gaps with speculation and interpretation. But this fragmented storytelling actually enhances the tragedy. Real tragedies don't come with clear narratives. There's no exposition explaining why things happened the way they did. There's just aftermath. bodies and objects and grieving survivors trying to make sense of what went wrong. By making you work to understand Gascoigne's story, Bloodborne makes you engage with it more deeply, makes you feel like you're uncovering something real rather than consuming a prepackaged narrative, and what you uncover is devastating. The story of a good man who became a monster, the story of a wife who died trying to save him, the story of daughters who paid the price for their parents' tragedy, the story of a friend who survived but wished he hadn't. It's a story without redemption, without silver linings, without consolation. It's pure tragedy in the classical sense. Good people destroyed by forces beyond their control, their virtues becoming the mechanisms of their own downfall. But there's something important in that tragedy, a truth that Bloodborne is trying to communicate through Gascoigne's story and through the game as a whole. The truth that some systems are too broken to be fixed from within. That participating in a corrupt system, even with good intentions, even trying to use that system to protect others, will eventually corrupt you. That you cannot hunt beasts without becoming beastly. That you cannot wade through blood without being stained by it. That the hunt itself is the problem, not just the beasts or the hunters or any individual component, but the entire cycle of violence that Yharnam has built its existence around. Gascoigne's mistake wasn't being weak or faithless or insufficiently careful. His mistake was believing he could be different, that he could participate in the hunt without being destroyed by it. He thought his love for his family would protect him. He thought his foreign origins might make him immune to Yharnam's curses. He thought his faith would provide armor against the scourge. But none of it mattered. The system took him, anyway ground him down, transformed him from protector to threat, from human to beast. And the cruelest part is that he did everything right. He was skilled and careful. He partnered with an experienced hunter. He tried to maintain boundaries between his hunting life and his home life. He used the music box to calm himself when the bloodlust became too strong. He had every advantage, every tool, every source of support someone could have, and it still wasn't enough. Because the game was rigged from the start. The hunt was always going to claim him. The only variable was when. This is what makes Bloodborne's horror so effective. It's not jump scares or grotesque creature designs, though the game has plenty of both. It's the existential horror of inevitability. The understanding that no matter how hard you try, no matter what precautions you take, the ending is predetermined. You will either die to a beast, or you will become one. Those are the only options. Fighting against this fate is admirable but ultimately pointless. The scourge takes everyone. Gascoigne's story asks us to consider what we would do in his situation. If you were a hunter in Yharnam, knowing what awaits all hunters, would you continue? If you had a family to protect, would you take up the weapons that would eventually destroy you? If you knew your love for them would make your transformation more tragic, would you love less, or would you love fiercely and accept the pain that comes with it? There are no good answers to these questions. Gascoigne couldn't stop hunting because the beast needed to be killed and someone had to do it. He couldn't stop loving his family because love isn't something you can turn off through force of will. He couldn't leave Yharnam because his family was there, his life was there, and where else would he go? He was trapped by circumstances, by duty, by love, by the very things that made him human. And those things destroyed him. But here's what's interesting, even knowing how it ends, even seeing the complete tragedy laid out, Many players find Gascoigne's story inspiring rather than just depressing, because he tried. Despite the inevitability of failure, despite knowing on some level that the transformation was coming, he fought against it. He loved his family fiercely. He tried to protect the innocent. He maintained his humanity for as long as he possibly could. The fact that he ultimately failed doesn't erase the nobility of the attempt. This is perhaps the real message of Gascoigne's story. Not that fighting is pointless, but that fighting is all we can do. The ending might be inevitable, but the journey matters. The choices we make along the way matter. The love we show and the people we protect and the stands we take against injustice matter, even if we ultimately lose. Gascoigne's failure doesn't diminish him. If anything, knowing he was doomed from the start makes his struggle more admirable, not less. His story is a warning about systems that consume everyone who participates in them. A warning that good intentions offer no protection when the corruption is systemic. But it's also a memorial, recognizing that even in darkness, people try to love, to protect, to maintain their humanity. And that effort, even when it fails, means something. The Gascoigne family lived in Yharnam during the worst of the Scourge. They stayed. They built a life. They loved each other. And even when everything fell apart, the fact that they tried matters. Their story joins countless others in Yharnam's history, but to them, it was everything. Their love was real. Their suffering was real. And recognizing that, refusing to let their story be forgotten, that's important. This is why we tell these stories, not because it changes anything, but because remembering matters. Bearing witness matters. As long as people play Bloodborne, as long as someone finds that music box and watches Gascoigne react, the family isn't completely erased. Some fragment persists, transformed into legend, into a cautionary tale about the cost of the hunt. Gascoigne is terrifying as a boss, but tragic as a character. A man destroyed by the very things that made him admirable. This duality makes him the perfect representative of Bloodborne's themes. The game asks you to see past surfaces, to understand that hunters and beasts aren't opposites, but points on a continuum. If you've enjoyed this deep dive into Bloodborne's lore, I'd really appreciate if you could hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. We've got so many more stories to tell from Yharnam. Lady Maria's tragic nobility, Gehrman's eternal imprisonment, the cosmic horror of Kos and the fishing hamlet. Comment below and let me know what story you'd like to hear next. The complete tragic story of Father Gascoigne is told. A foreign cleric became a hunter, became a beast. A wife became a widow, became a corpse. 2 daughters became orphans, became casualties. A loyal friend became another body in the Tomb of Oedon. Complete destruction. And Yharnam continued its endless cycle. But we remember, we bear witness. The hunt continues. More hunters prowl. More families wait behind locked doors. And somewhere in the Tomb of Oedon, beneath moonlight that never fades, the bloodstains remain. Testament to the family that fell there, warning to every hunter that they're walking the same path. May you find comfort in the darkness and peace in whatever dreams await you. Until next time, good hunter. The lullaby plays one final time, the music box winds down, the notes fade into silence, and in that silence we remember what was lost in the cursed city of Yharnam. Father Gascoigne, Viola, 2 daughters with ribbons in their hair, Henryk the old hunter, 5 lives, 1 family, a story that will echo through Yharnam's streets as long as we remember that monsters were once people and people who hunt monsters eventually become the very things they're fighting. Rest now. Good night, good hunter. May you dream of gentler things than the Tomb of Oedon.